And good evening. Tonight, amid the destruction left by Hurricane Ian, politics giving way to humanity. The president and the governor united for a moment in support of the people of Florida. President Biden shaking hands with Governor Ron DeSantis on the ground there in Fort Myers. DeSantis, a frontrunner for the Republican nomination for president and who has consistently slammed the president, civil in his interactions with the commander-in-chief. Biden promising residents in Florida that the federal government will, quote, be there until it's finished. Adding about DeSantis, we have very different political philosophies, but we worked hand in glove. The visit coming as residents from hard-hit Sanibel Island brace for their first look at the damage, officials letting some return home. The islanders warned they could be shocked by what they see. And in Fort Myers, homeowners already coming to grips with all that they have lost. The devastation so striking for some, they are now vowing to never rebuild along Florida's Gulf Coast. NBC's Sam Brock is in Fort Myers tonight, and he joins us and leads us off tonight.
As Marine One flew into Florida neighborhoods gashed by a generational hurricane, the two men spearheading the outreach, President Joe Biden and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, side by side and shaking hands, putting aside political differences to demonstrate unity in crisis.
We're not leaving until this gets done. I promise you that.
For communities cut off from the outside world, rescued in buckets and forced from their homes.
The heart, the soul, the houses, it's just gone. It's done.
No magic visit or emergency declaration will immediately undo disaster, but they are receiving assurances that state and federal levers are working together.
We are cutting through the bureaucracy. We are cutting through the red tape, and that's from local government, state government, all the way up to the president.
I feel like Governor DeSantis is very sympathetic to what we're going through here. I think he's already had hands-on. He's been here every day.
On the ground, people's lives littered across front lawns.
It's just unbelievable.
Robert Harmon has been sleeping in his car at 79 years old, unable to find a hotel.
It was just an old trailer, but you don't realize how nice it was till it's gone.
As for those political visits,
you think they understand what you're going through?
No. No, I don't think so. They think they do, but they don't. Till you see it, you don't.
Despite the promises of support and disaster aid, the reality remains harsh. At least 115 people now killed, including 49-year-old Elizabeth McGuire, who was found dead in her home, clutching her cell phone. Longtime resident Gordon Meyer did manage to survive the raging floodwaters, but has no interest in building back again here.
Has this experience changed your desire to stay in Cape Coral?
Yes.
You're reconsidering it?
We're leaving. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're leaving. No, this house is too low, and a new house that would be comparable would be $1 million.
Now, with the bridge back up on Pine Island and some families suddenly homeless after their mobile home park was wiped away.
It's just so hard to believe. It's just so surreal.
Hope still remains stronger than hurricane-force winds. Search and rescue crews, many with experience in the armed services, find fallen American flags and place them upright once again.
Sam Brock joins us now live from Fort Myers Beach, Florida. Sam, we cannot get over those images on video that you're seeing and your team up close every single day. We know that some in Sanibel were allowed into their homes for the first time today, or what was left of their homes. What are some of the stories you're hearing back from that?
They're going out there right now, Tom. It was interesting to hear the governor say he thought the damage on Sanibel Island might be the worst thing that he saw in this entire tour. Now, what they need is documentation to prove they actually live on Sanibel Island. They also need to find a way to get out there because the bridge for Sanibel has not been restored just yet. And we found out a few minutes ago, our crew on the ground here, the boats to Sanibel Island are actually leaving right where I'm standing, the dock over my shoulder. There's some volunteers taking folks out there to see their homes for the first time and try to digest, even if it's still standing or not, what they're looking at, Tom.
Can't imagine what that experience is going to be like. Sam, you were mentioning the bridges that are out there, and I know you have some new reporting also about how this is affecting the railroads as well in Florida.
This is terrifying. So I spoke with the owner-operator of the regional railroad network here, who says that there are 6 bridges, railroad bridges, that do go over bodies of water, a couple of rivers, that have essentially been eroding. So 4 of them are just gone altogether, Tom. 2 of them are damaged. As far as the ones that are destroyed, they say best case scenario, 45 to 60 days to repair. And contextually, that's important because they're trying to bring in plywood and lumber and materials to make concrete and rebar, all of the things they would use to build up businesses and properties. That's now strained just to try to get that supply into this devastation zone. That is going to be a story to follow in the months ahead.
Yeah, how to get that cargo back into rebuild. I do want to ask you about that moment between President Biden and Governor Ron DeSantis. And it actually reminded me of what happened during Superstorm Sandy in the tri-state area, and specifically New Jersey, when then Governor Christie gave President Obama a hug. It hurt him politically. This situation seemed a little different. I know that Governor Ron DeSantis reached out to shake President Biden's hand first. What was that moment like, and what are you hearing?
It's just so interesting to hear you make that comparison because that was less than a decade ago, but it feels like a lifetime ago, right? Because think about the political climate that we're in right now, that the fact that these 2 leaders of their respective governments, the federal government and the state of Florida, the mere fact, Tom, that they shook hands and walked next to each other meant a moment of unity. And yet it did speak volumes. You heard Governor DeSantis say the way that all of these different channels were operating, state, local, and federal, how he was observing it is the best example of sort of synchronicity that he has seen in a disaster so far. Coming from someone who has been incredibly critical of the federal government, hearing him say that meant a lot to this community today.
Yeah, because they need that help. They don't want politics. All right, Sam Brock leading us off tonight. Sam, we appreciate it. Now to a move by the world's top oil-producing countries, potentially making your next trip to the gas station even more expensive. The OPEC alliance announcing a major cut in oil production by 2 million barrels a day. The decision coming after a push by the Biden administration to increase output. NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa has the details.
After a year of tumultuous gas prices, signs today pain at the pump could worsen as some of the world's top oil producers, including Saudi Arabia and Russia, promise deep cuts to output. OPEC Plus announced it will slash production by 2 million barrels per day to spur a recovery in crude prices. The White House today calling the decision short-sighted.
We are providing security, stability to the energy markets.
The move defying an aggressive push from President Biden to keep fuel flowing, even visiting Saudi Arabia this summer to convince them to increase oil production. With midterms just weeks away, higher energy prices could be a blow to Democrats and undo months of steadily dropping costs at the pump in most areas of the country.
Talk to me about the timing of the cuts.
The barrels that are going to be cut will be cut in November. But what it means also is higher prices for drivers, higher prices for heating, higher prices for holiday travel.
In parts of California, gas prices are already topping $7 a gallon.
I got to go to where I'm going, so I got to pay it, but I'm not happy about it.
And across the country in Massachusetts, Scott McFarlane has been in the heating oil business for more than 50 years. He says customers should be prepared to pay more as temperatures there fall.
The timing is awful for us. It's going to be a tough winter for everybody, the consumers and anybody in business.
Adding insult to injury for families already struggling with soaring inflation.
Emily Aketa joins us now from our top story studios in New York. So, Emily, the Biden administration also says it's looking at ways to decrease its dependence on OPEC oil. What could that look like?
Yeah, a couple of things the president is looking at doing. First and foremost, he is calling on U.S. energy companies to bring down prices at the pump. He is also directing the Energy Department to continue pooling from fuel reserves. So keep in mind that is a finite resource. It is not limitless. And Tom, in the background of all of this, remember, with rising oil prices, that could keep inflation up higher for longer. And we know what that means. It puts more pressure on the Federal Reserve to continue with those interest rate hikes. Tom?
All right, Emily Aketa for us. Emily, we appreciate it. The OPEC Plus decision to cut oil output in November, coming ahead of the holiday travel season, but also the midterm elections here in the U.S. NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung joins Top Story live tonight with a deeper look. So, Brian, the national average of gas is back down to $3.83, which obviously is better than the $5 a gallon we had earlier this year. How long will it take for this production cut to trickle down to higher prices at the pump here in the U.S.?
Yeah, well, as we just heard heard from Emily's fantastic reporting there, we're not expected to see OPEC actually do its production cuts until November. So it's going to be a few weeks before we see the full impact of all of this. But you already have the likes of Patrick DeHaan over at Gas Buddy projecting that this could raise the price at the pump by as much as 15 to 30 cents per gallon. And based off of what we've already seen in terms of the uptick over the past few weeks in the price of gas at the pump, that could take prices above $4, obviously depending on what part of the country you're fueling up your car in. Now, of course, all of this is contributing to the overall inflationary story, something that the midterm elections are very much going to hinge on as Americans go to the polls very concerned about what's happening with prices, Tom.
So Election Day is November 8th, right? Will we see that before November 8th, I guess, is the big question, what I was trying to get at. It sounds like we're going to feel this after the midterms. Is that true?
That is, at least for right now, that appears to be the timing. Now, of course, we have already seen, Tom, prices at the pump start to nudge up as of the last few weeks. Where we'll be by the first week of November remains anybody's guess. But for right now, the Biden administration has said that it wants to further tap the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, essentially the type of resources that they have set aside to try to increase the supply domestically to keep prices low. But remember, that SPR is at the lowest level since 1984. How much further they can dip into that does remain an open question. But at least for right now, the Biden administration is saying they'll do what they can and might even consult with Congress about what to do in terms of keeping prices low.
Yeah, and then I have to ask you, OPEC and Russia, are they doing this just for money, or are there political implications here as well? Is there any thinking that this is possibly also being done to hurt the Biden administration?
Yeah, important to remember that the OPEC Plus cartel that we're talking about is 20-plus countries. Saudi Arabia and Russia are the co-chairs of that organization. The United States is not part of that. And Russia likely wanted to support a decrease to the international supply because higher prices on those barrels of oil would support essentially their financing for their war in Ukraine. It's been interesting to see how the country of Russia has seen their budget surplus decline as of the past few months, in part due to the money that they're funneling into this war, but then also the lack of revenues coming in because the price of a barrel of oil has gone down so much. With the supply decreasing, that could likely take prices higher and give them a little bit of a windfall. Interesting to see how the OPEC Plus member countries also said that this is really not that bad compared to the oil prices, or rather heating oil prices for nat gas, for example. That has spiked a lot. This kind of gas price increase might not be as high. But remember, the reason why nat gas is more expensive, because of Russia's war with Ukraine.
All right, Brian Chung for us. And as we've reported here on Top Story, of course, Russia's still making very healthy profits off their oil and gas. Brian, we appreciate that. Now to the war in Ukraine, which we were just talking about there with Brian, with new reporting from the New York Times tonight that the United States intelligence agencies believe parts of the Ukrainian government authorized this August car bomb that killed Daria Dugina, the daughter of a prominent Russian nationalist. You may remember we brought you the story here on Top Story. Concerns now growing that the killing might escalate tensions between Russia and the U.S. So for more on this now, and it really is a developing story, I want to bring in former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. Ambassador, thanks so much for joining Top Story again tonight. So, you know, Ukraine denied involvement in the killing immediately, but how significant is this finding by U.S. intelligence agencies, according to the New York Times?
Well, Tom, it is a surprise. The Ukrainians all along have said this is not in their interest. The Ukrainians all along have said this is a distraction. They've got other things on their mind, as they point out. They're trying to push the Russians out of their own country. And actually, they're doing a pretty good job of it right now. They are succeeding on the battlefield. That's their focus. So they say, I've talked to the people, the Ukrainians, about this when it happened, and they said, this is a distraction. This is not something that we want to focus on. We want to focus on our country, getting the Russians out of our country. So, but Tom, I will say one other thing. There are Russians and some Russians who have now come to Ukraine and are working with the Ukrainian government, who have said they are doing this kind of stuff. They're this kind of sabotage inside of Russia. So there are some Russian Ukrainians with now Ukrainian citizenship who have claimed responsibility for these kinds of things, maybe even for this murder of Dugina.
You know, there are quote unquote rules to war, but Ukrainians have had their women and children dying. Ukraine had their country invaded. Do you think Ukraine had to do this to essentially send a message to Vladimir Putin?
No, because the Ukrainians are sending a message to Vladimir Putin by defeating Vladimir Putin's army in Ukraine. They've defeated the Russian army north of Kyiv. They've defeated the Russian army in Kharkiv. They've defeated the Russian army in Izum. They've defeated the Russian army in Liman. They are now defeating the Russian army in Kherson. That's where their focus is. So they are sending a strong message to Putin that they're going to beat him on the battlefield.
So where do you think this puts the U.S. right now? The U.S. has put so much support behind President Zelensky, offering weapons to Ukraine. This is something that was not part of the U.S. playbook. So where do you think this puts us as Ukraine is still one of our allies?
It is absolutely one of our partners and allies, and we need to continue to support them. The Ukrainians are fighting our fight. They are fighting for their own land, of course, their own freedom, their own independence from Russia, but they are also defending Western Europe and Eastern Europe and NATO, and in some real sense, the United States security. So we need to continue to support them as they push the Russians back out to try to reestablish some rules by which nations deal with each other that the Russians have torn up. And the way to reestablish them is to get the Russians out of Ukraine.
Former Ambassador William Taylor. Ambassador, we appreciate your time as always. Now back here at home in the major headline out of Hollywood, Alec Baldwin and the producers of Rust settling a lawsuit with the family of the cinematographer who was fatally shot on the set. And now they plan to finish the movie with the blessing of the victim's husband. Here's Miguel Almaguer.
Tonight, nearly a year after the tragedy on the set of Rust, the family of Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer fatally shot by Alec Baldwin, has reached an undisclosed settlement in its wrongful death lawsuit against the film's famed actor and producers. With production on the movie set to resume in January, Hutchins' husband Matthew will now become an executive producer to pay tribute to Helena's final work.
The idea that the person holding the gun causing it to discharge is not responsible is absurd to me.
After speaking exclusively to Hoda Kotb earlier this year, Hutchins seems to have changed his position, saying in a statement today, "I have no interest in engaging in recriminations or attributions of blame to the producers or Mr. Baldwin." Hutchins will now partner with the actor.
I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them, never.
Who told ABC News he was not responsible for Helena's death.
Just so angry to see him talk about her death so publicly in such a detailed way, and then to not accept any responsibility.
As one civil case draws to a close, the Santa Fe district attorney could file criminal charges any day. With Baldwin, the film's armorer, and the assistant director all part of the investigation, the DA said today, if the facts and evidence warrant criminal charges under New Mexico law, then charges will be brought. No one is above the law.
With the movie's principal players returning to the set, if anyone is charged, it's quite possible a criminal trial in the shooting could be underway at the very same time of filming. Tom?
Miguel Almaguer with that big development there. Miguel, we appreciate it. Now to a major fentanyl drug bust in New York. DEA agents seizing 15,000 multicolored pills or rainbow fentanyl hidden in a Lego box. The arrest sparking growing fears that cartels are targeting younger children to use it. Correspondent Ron Allen has more.
Tonight, the disturbing details about the biggest seizure to date in New York of a deadly and deceptive drug. 15,000 brightly colored fentanyl pills, known as rainbow fentanyl, found hidden in a Lego box, a children's toy. The colorful drug that looks like candy is what DEA agents call every parent's worst nightmare.
This is calculated. This is treacherous deception to market rainbow fentanyl like candy.
The bust, part of an ongoing DEA operation called One Pill Can Kill, because just 2 milligrams of fentanyl can be deadly. Officials say during a recent 4-month period, more than 36 million lethal doses have been removed from the nation's illegal drug supply. The 15,000 pills seized in New York, investigators say, is the largest in New York to date.
This seizure that you see here today of rainbow fentanyl This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Agents charged a 48-year-old woman from New Jersey, Letitia Bush, with transporting the drugs discovered in the backseat of a car. Bush was arraigned in Manhattan criminal court on Friday with bail set at $25,000 cash. But investigators traced the drugs to cartels in Mexico, which investigators say use colors and dyes to mimic candy or legitimate prescription drugs with materials they get from China.
Mexican cartels don't care if drug users live or die, as long as they can continue to expand their market and make money.
The DEA says the packages of bite-sized and multicolored pills seized in New York are the equivalent of some 500,000 lethal doses, and that fentanyl is involved in some 80% of overdose deaths in the city.
It shows a law enforcement, a new way that these drugs are being marketed and sold. The colorful nature of this drug will appeal more to teenagers and young adults. It's also unfortunate that the pills were pressed into what looks like generic oxycodone, which might make people trust it, not realizing it's fentanyl and overdose on it rather rapidly.
More than 72,000 Americans died from fentanyl overdoses last year, an epidemic that experts say shows no sign of easing. And as you just heard, the investigators say the fentanyl they're seizing is just the tip of the iceberg. Tom?
Okay, Ron Allen for us. Ron, thank you. We turn now to a tragedy in paradise. An American tourist killed while on vacation in Turks and Caicos. Officials saying he was shot by armed gang members while returning from an excursion. NBC's Nayala Charles has a story.
Tonight, potential new concerns for travelers after an American tourist visiting the Turks and Caicos Islands was killed with two others in a shooting, according to police. The suspected gunman even sprang this police vehicle that intercepted them. Turks and Caicos police say the same armed gang member shot at a car holding tourists. The killed American identified as Virginian Kent Carter, a father, veteran, and vice president of a local NAACP.
Words alone aren't enough to say how much this hurts, how much we grieve right now.
Police say a tour guide with Carter was also killed and others injured, including an officer. No arrests have been announced.
I believe the original attack was targeted and carried out by armed gang members who act without conscience, who have no regard for life.
Turks and Caicos Islands government releasing a statement saying the incident was rare and does not reflect who we are as a people. The State Department has a standing travel advisory for the islands, asking Americans to exercise caution due to crime, especially in Providenciales, at the same area where Carter was killed.
The tourist is not going to be the target. My concern is that that tourist is sitting at a table having lunch next to the target, and these gangs, they go in there and they're not very careful. They just spray bullets.
This just the latest violent event at a popular vacation destination. In late 2021, tourists witnessing moments authorities have tied to drug cartels near Cancun, including this one from November, when two suspected drug dealers were killed on the beach, sending panicked tourists into the lobby of their hotel, some even barricading themselves in their rooms. And in October, an American resident killed in a suspected drug gang shootout in Tulum while vacationing. A tragedy in paradise in a community left grieving one of their own back home.
Just probably one of the best neighbors I've ever had. So this is really heartbreaking.
Nayala Charles joins us now live from Los Angeles. Nayala, I'd like to go back to Turks and Caicos and what happened there. You know, Turks and Caicos, it's known for tourism, so popular with so many Americans. And I guess what struck me in your story is how the police there was talking about armed gangs, which can never be good, but also they shouldn't lead to any kind of surprise by those authorities. Should Americans be very concerned about traveling abroad there?
Well, in terms of Turks and Caicos, that right now has a level 2 travel advisory from the U.S. Department of State. And other than that, it really depends on where you want to go. The expert we spoke to, Robert Almonte, says he only advises people travel to countries that at most have a level 1 travel advisory from the U.S. Department of State. For context, like I said, Turks and Caicos has a level 2 travel advisory, and parts of Mexico have a level 4 travel advisory, which is defined as do not travel. So, Tom, but regardless of where anyone goes, it's important for travelers to always be cognizant of their surroundings.
All right, we are back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin with the chilling new video of the moment a family of four was kidnapped in California. Police releasing new surveillance video showing the kidnapper leading two members of the family out of a Mercer County business at gunpoint with their hands tied behind their backs. The 8-month-old baby and her mother then also led out and placed in a truck. A person of interest now in custody, but the family of four has still not been found. A Purdue University student has been arrested and charged with murder after allegedly killing his roommate. A 20-year-old senior found dead in his room with, quote, multiple sharp force traumatic injuries. His roommate, a Korean exchange student, Jimmy Shaw, calling police from their room to report his death. Shaw taken into custody minutes after making that call. Police have not yet revealed a motive. A dramatic video out of Maryland shows bystanders rushing to take out a gunman. Two men seen struggling for control of a gun on the side of the road in Adelphi after the man in black shot the man in orange in the chest. The third man then running in, kicking that suspect in the head. More onlookers then jumping to wrestle the gun away. That suspect now charged with attempted second-degree murder. And SpaceX successfully launching a crew to the International Space Station. The rocket taking off this afternoon from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. On board, 2 American astronauts, 1 Japanese astronaut, and a Russian cosmonaut. The crew will spend 1 year orbiting the Earth on the ISS. The mission could be one of the last joint efforts with Russia before their partnership with NASA ends in 2024. Okay, we want to turn now to a growing scandal in New Orleans where the mayor is facing backlash after a local government investigation found she used tens of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money for upgrades on business trips. Now she says she'll repay the money, but questions linger about how and when. Maya Eaglin has more.
Tonight, the mayor of New Orleans facing fierce backlash after a local government investigation found she used city funds to upgrade her international flights to the tune of nearly $30,000. One first-class trip to France last July cost over $17,000 alone. At the time, the mayor saying this.
Expenses incurred doing business on behalf of the city will not be reimbursed to the city.
She went on to explain that the upgraded travel expenses were for her health and safety relating to the COVID-19 pandemic.
My health and well-being is a priority, and especially it's all doing city business. And I have to be at my best doing it.
In a statement to several other news stations, Cantrell said, quote, anyone who wants to question how I protect myself just doesn't understand the world black women walk in. Now a petition calling for her recall is growing.
This recall is because of the job performance of the mayor.
Over 10,000 people have signed the petition, many claiming her travel controversies and a rise in crime as the main reasons behind the recall push. New Orleans crime has skyrocketed this year, with homicides up 142% since 2019, and their own Metropolitan Crime Commission naming the city the murder capital of the U.S. But Mayor Cantrell telling our affiliate last month she sees the recall as a distraction.
Like I've done with every crisis, with every disaster that I've had to face and challenge that I've had to face, I do it with integrity, I do it with dignity, and I do it with hard work.
After months of being embroiled in the controversy, the mayor now saying she will pay the money back.
I will have to reimburse the city for those business expenses.
She did not say whether the money would come from personal funds or her campaign.
Because it wasn't a business expense, then that really does give me the wherewithal to adequately refund the city of New Orleans for business services rendered on my behalf.
Cantrell telling our affiliate WDSU she does not need to provide a timeline for the repayment.
Are you able to tell us when the money will be repaid, Madam Mayor?
I'm not doing that. I don't need to do that.
This isn't the first time she's been accused of using taxpayer dollars for personal use.
New Orleans mayoral candidate LaToya Cantrell used her city credit card.
In 2017, a criminal complaint was sent to the Attorney General's office suggesting improper credit card use.
And a $600 meal on the city of New Orleans.
The documents were obtained by WDSU, and Cantrell reimbursed the city over $9,000.
Cantrell did pay the money back, but in some cases, those payments were made months, even years after the purchases.
Cantrell and her legal team denied wrongdoing, and after a year-long investigation into the 2017 payment, no criminal charges were filed.
Maya Eaglin joins us now. Maya, do we know why Mayor Cantrell decided to finally pay up the upgraded airfare?
Tom, so the city attorney and her chief administration officer actually did a review of the policy and found that these extra charges did have to be reimbursed. Additionally, there was a lot of negative press surrounding this incident, so the public pressure for her to change her mind was pretty strong.
So you have this public pressure campaign. You also have now this recall campaign. What exactly is it going to take for the citizens of New Orleans who are unhappy with their mayor to get this on a ballot and to get people to vote for it?
So the petition currently has 10,000 signatures, and we know that 50,000 more need to be added to that document in order for it to be added to the ballot on the February election. Once it's there, Cantrell can challenge that, but it also could lead to a special election, in which case she would have to rerun basically for mayor. Tom?
Okay, Maya Eaglin for us tonight here on Top Story. Maya, we appreciate it. Now to President Trump's appeal to the nation's highest court. The former president's team filing an emergency request for the Supreme Court to weigh in on those documents seized from his Florida home. The move questioning the 11th Circuit Court's decision to let the DOJ review 103 classified documents without sharing them with the special master. Criminal defense attorney Andel Brown joins me live on set here on Top Story. So Andel, I guess my first question is, why does the former president want the special master involved in this case?
Well, the former president's team has argued that the delay by not allowing the special master to review those documents may cause harm to his case. The special master has a lot of work to do. He needs to do it quickly, and it's time sensitive. That's been the argument they've been making, and that's the argument they filed to the Supreme Court.
But explain it to me. I understand about the personal documents that the president did not want the DOJ to see. That seems fair and logical. But why get the special master involved with all the classified documents?
Well, Trump's team's argument is that all of the documents are subject to the Presidential Records Act. And as the president, he can classify, declassify documents as he deems fit. And the special master needs to make sure that that privilege is protected.
What do you think about the strength of the argument that this decision caused harm on the president?
Well, interestingly enough, in the president's team's filing over 300 pages, there's very little mention of harm to the president. Most of it is about harm to the special master. They do, however, repeat Judge Eileen Cannon's ruling that there may be harm to his reputation or harm to his legacy if he is indicted based on information that the government maybe should not have. And that's what Judge Eileen Cannon of the U.S. District Court said.
So break through the headline, break through the legal mess, if you will, here. What is the strategy here? Because even at the end of the day, if the Supreme Court, say they take up the case, say they side with the former president, the issue is still at hand here. So what's the strategy here, you think?
Well, I think as a defense attorney and, someone who's dealt with criminal prosecutions, I think the defense, Trump's team, they want to see what the government has. They want to be able to prepare for their defense in advance if the government is going to see.
The government has. I mean, he had the classified documents. You think, or what is quote unquote classified documents? You think he would already know what the defense has?
We would assume so, but we don't know that. And I think Trump's team, part of their strategy is to get those documents to the special master so they can predict what's coming down the pipeline for Trump.
Because if the special master gets them, then they'll be able to get a look at them?
They'll be able to have a say in how those documents are decided.
Do you think this is a play at all to sort of extend the investigation, if you will, or extend the time that the DOJ can take a closer and harder look at these documents or start any type of charges or prosecution?
Well, here's the interesting thing. What Trump's team is asking for will not stop the Department of Justice from necessarily looking at those documents, but they will go to the special master. To answer your question, though, time is always the friend of the defense. When you're trying to figure out how you're going to defend your client, you want as much time as necessary. And here, they want to get over what may possibly be a secret process of a grand jury indictment.
I was looking at some of the headlines being written about this because it obviously made news when it first happened, but people are now, some people in the media are criticizing this, saying this is not going to be heard in front of the Supreme Court. What's your take? Will the Supreme Court, you think, take this up?
It's a tough call right now. As we know, the Supreme Court could very well say, we don't want to deal with this. There are a couple of factors to be considered. One of those factors is whether the appellant will suffer irreparable harm. They're looking at whether or not, those factors are met. In this case, I think Trump's team's case has some weaknesses in it that need to be addressed. I don't think, based on what the Supreme Court has done in the past, that they're going to take this one up on appeal.
There's going to be a presidential election in about 2 years. Do you think the investigation into these classified documents extends up until then, or will it be wrapped by then, do you think?
It's hard to tell, but if Trump's team continues at the pace they're going, they're trying to stretch this thing out. so that he has the opportunity to participate in the election without the threat of an indictment hanging over him with him.
DOJ. Thanks so much for watching this edition of Top Story. I'm Tom Llamas reporting from Miami. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.